So here we are, and the theme that emerged clearly yesterday was one of collaboration. And so I've just sort of try and go back to where our thinking at BTL has gone, and we've heard several times already that our approach, our mission really, to significantly improve assessment experience for everyone. And I think, like for almost every business, that translates into simple thing of solving problems, solving our clients' problems, and it's really pretty basic, making ourselves useful. That's what we do, and we try to make ourselves useful, and in return that ends up being a service and a business that works. But at the heart of this is innovation and collaboration, and so I thought it might be just interesting to just talk a little bit about that before we get going. Amelia really said something that I think struck everybody, that innovation takes guts. And I just thought, yeah, that really is, and we all know about this because we're all involved in innovation in our own place of work, and it's not always easy. You're often having to advocate things that you know that if they succeed, you might get a small pat on the head, and if they fail, you've got a big problem. So it does take guts, and I thought it would be interesting to look back in history a bit. So next slide. So here we are, here's a couple of people with guts. On the left we've got George Stephenson, who was the creator with his son of Rocket, the engine at the top. And it was interesting just to have a look at that and see what they did. And the innovations that went into that engine are largely the ones that were unchanged for the next 100 years. The engine changed, the appearance changed, but the things like the pistons driving the wheels directly was an innovation there. The steam drawing the fire through the firebox was an innovation there. Having multiple tubes in the firebox was an innovation, and a host of other things, and they were all there. Oh, a lead plug in the boiler, so that if it got to too high a pressure and got dangerous, it fired the lead plug out. Every steam engine after that had a lead plug in it. And that's just remarkable. And so these guys were thinking all these things up on the spot. And of course, here we are with the very ship that we looked at last night. And that picture of Brunel I always find fascinating, because if you look behind him, those are the chains that were used to launch Great Eastern, which was the boat that came after Great Britain. And there he is. So these guys were busy innovating, and they were doing it really largely, as it happens, on their own initiative or with often private backing, and that's still the case today. Often getting governments to support these things is hard work, and so individuals often go off and do it, and then, of course, they become adopted by the mainstream. We're seeing it today with electric cars, that even the mainstream car industry is very reluctant, but Elon Musk has gone out there and started flogging electric cars, and they've all suddenly had a massive jolt, and the whole industry is going to be transformed in a way that we can't yet imagine. Okay, next one, please. So this is interesting, because Samuel Lister, in his day, he's based in Bradford, where we are, built, it was probably one of the wealthiest guys in the world, and certainly built the biggest mill in the world. There's a picture of it there, Lister Mill, which is still there in Bradford. And so he was really a very successful entrepreneur by any standards. But I looked at what it said about him in the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's an old-fashioned concept in itself, isn't it? But I looked at what it said. Actually, it said it. I didn't look it up in the actual encyclopedia. I looked it up on Google, actually. But here we are. And it says, there we are, Massam. He was a baron, became a member of the House of Lords. English inventor. So the thing that's remembered about him more is he was an inventor. He had nearly 300 patents to his name when he died. And so that's, although he was an entrepreneur, he was an inventor, and that's the thing that's going. So innovation has always been at the heart of this kind of activity. Okay, can we have the next one? So these inventors, now George Stephenson's son Robert was obviously involved in the extension of the railways right across the UK, and one of the biggest challenges was the Britannia Bridge over the Menai Straits. And the remarkable thing about it was that Brunel and Stevenson were big rivals in their day. I mean, Brunel's railways were a different gauge even to the normal gauge, the gauge we have today. But when Stevens was putting the bridge up across the Menai Straits, it was a entirely new design. Brunel was there to help him. He was there to support him. In other words, competition and collaboration running alongside each other. And we all see that in the work we're in, especially in the innovative phase where people are innovating, but also and collaborating, and then sometimes competing, and all of us have that experience that sometimes we have to work out whether we're competing on this particular project or collaborating. And it's a great way of working, especially when you think that the sort of work we're on is a small part at the moment of the whole assessment piece. And if we're going to succeed from our small part into migrating out into the whole of the assessment piece, we've got to work together at times. We can't just compete with each other and try to treat it as if it's a zero-sum game, as Donald Trump seemed to think the world of business is, and the world of innovation is. Okay, next slide, please. So, what is innovation? There's a tendency to think innovation is just about technology, and we're always saying at BTL, that's only a small part of it. It's products, processes, services, yes, technology, but probably most of all business models. Certainly we spend a lot of time talking about, now how are we going to organize this? What kind of business model do we need to make sure that it gets out there and people adopt it? And that's just as important as the actual technology itself. I mean, how did Brunel get those metal plates that were all riveted together? How did he get anybody to make them? I mean, there's no industry that was there making metal plates of that size in those kind of volumes. So the whole logistical business model exercise needed to take place. And so that's quite important in understanding innovation. Okay, next slide, please. So coming to BTL then, we'll just sort of have a quick look back. In fact, we do have a whole innovation process where we deliberately try to drive innovation and make sure we keep doing it. I'm very concerned that one of the things that happens in a lot of organizations as they grow, innovation is driven out. One of the things about it is that people who push innovation in businesses tend to be quite wacky, quite eccentric, quite awkward people. Some of you, I suspect, fit into that category, but I couldn't possibly say. And so they tend to get squeezed out a bit because the conformists in businesses want to just get on with the job, you know, and just move things forward and not waste time on innovations. Because if you don't innovate, and that, as you grow, that happens more and more. We saw it with the textile mills we're talking about. After Lister and his generation died, a lot of innovation stopped, and that kept going for 2 generations before foreign competition really took over the business. But a little bit more innovation and knowing how to do innovation could have produced a very different outcome. Anyway, back to BTL. So PASS itself, of course, it was an innovation. Paper Plus, our test centre network, sponsored Scrum teams. So those are the ones which have succeeded. Of course, behind that, there are lots of ideas that we've discussed, talked about, developed a bit, which we've then dropped. And probably, 9 out of 10 ideas get dropped. Some of them get dropped before I even get through Keith's door. Where are you, Keith? I knock on Keith's door. Hello, Keith, I've got an idea. Too busy, Bob. We'll talk about it some other time. But that's inevitable. There will be lots of ideas that people generate, and we are actually looking within BTL of how we can take ideas from the whole business, from anybody who's got one, in such a way that it doesn't get filtered out by people in between. And we've set up an innovation hub, which we've just got going, and we're hoping that's going to help to generate as many ideas as possible. Current examples, we've heard about remote proctoring, which is an innovation which is in its relatively early phase. Adaptive testing, well, that's moved a bit further down the line thanks to the work with the Welsh Government. Linear optimization, we're going to hear about this afternoon. Is that before or after the fireworks, Dave? Fireworks at the end. and the sort of things that we're thinking about, there is quite a long list, but here's just a couple of examples. AI, of course, always at the back of mind is, do we need to be worrying about AI? Is it going to be useful here? Is it going to be useful there? Games, 3D animation. The lesson we've learned over the years is not to jump ahead too quickly. We are a fairly slow-moving kind of area, and if you go too far too quickly, just waste of money, waste of time, and nobody really takes much notice. But that's the way we go about it. Next slide, please. So collaboration has been important, it is important, and right from the beginning, as was pointed out, the user groups have now turned into this conference, but there are many, many other examples. I think that's all I had to say about that. Oh yes, one other point, which is that the noticeable feature to me, yes, and we're aware of it, but it becomes more obvious at an event like this, is how global the collaboration is becoming. And that's something that really is clear. The global cat is out of the bag. A relatively small organisation like ours, a relatively small activity like ours, has already gone global, and there's no stopping it. And I sometimes wonder whether our politicians have twigged what actually is going on, really, in terms of business, industry, and so on. Organisations will go wherever they can to get the kind of input that they need and to achieve the success that they want to achieve. That is going to happen, that's going to continue to happen, and that's an important feature of all these things.